Behold, the latest white-funded, white-run answer to the black media. The latest attempt to counter-program against the black grassroots, to try to draw black eyeballs away from us and the message of unapologetic blackness that we represent. So, this is what 2.5 years, over $50 million, access to over 50 million households, a few notable black faces, and something resembling production value gets you, huh? The anti-black powers that be gave these guys everything they could possibly need to be successful. There was no excuse for failure. They had every chance there is. So how'd it go? About as well as the white media's other attempts to reverse engineer their own phony black grassroots. Yep, the black media makes it look easy, but it's not. Compare all the money and time that the billionaire Shahid Khan and the white powers back of him put into this failure, and you compare that with what the black grassroots have accomplished. We don't have $50 million operations, but we produce multi-million-dollar results. They had a billionaire's money, some lavish parties to promote themselves, and some washed-up cable has-beens and never-gonna-be's, but what they didn't have was you. And why was that? Because it was obvious to everyone from the very start that these clowns were just a white media front. They were AstroTurf, not the grassroots. They carried all the same talking points as the CNNs and the MSNBCs. It was excruciatingly obvious. They promoted the interests of every other conceivable constituency except the black people who they claimed they were going to speak for. I told you about how even on their own website, their promotional material talking about black and brown and all the rest of it. And their on-air talent didn't do them any favors. Yeah, I know that there's like 1 or 2 individuals there who at least were saying some halfway sensible stuff, but the problem is that they were greatly outnumbered by the vast majority of on-air talent who clearly were trying to get themselves a gig with some white media company. And when you make people like Charles Blow and Mark Lamont shill the faces of your network, that's guaranteed failure right there. Shill, Blow, and almost all of the rest of their co-hosts on BNC, these guys are the exact same type of conceited punks that we've been subjected to for years on white cable, and we don't like them. These bootlicking Negroes who are clicked up with the Boule or the HBCU fraternity sorority circles, and they think because they hang out with white liberals and repeat all of their talking points that makes them smarter than us. They see themselves as the talented, forget about talented 10th, they're the talented 1%. And here they are, stuck with the onerous task of attempting to elevate the mentality of these lowly, ignorant black masses, and to get us to understand that race isn't the biggest problem facing us, while we face lots of problems such as class, and we need to focus on alliances, and how we're all in this together, and black problems are no bigger and no more important than anyone else's, and we gotta fight the patriarchy, and we could smell the phony on those chumps from a mile away. Now, while the guy who allegedly came up with this abortion, J.C. Watts, is black, the man who has the deep pockets for it is not. Shahid Khan, the Pakistani billionaire, he owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe. He also has something to do with automotive parts as well. That's how he made his money. He invested, or rather threw away, $50 million in 2019 alone to launch this fraud. $50 million. That's what their startup capital was. I know you couldn't tell by looking, but that's what they said, $50 million. Now, he did that for a gang of nobodies who had no audience base, no platform, and no chance of success. Why did he do that? Because white power and their non-white auxiliaries are always willing to put tens of millions of dollars into inventing and propping up phony black mouthpieces like this. They've always done this. So this proves that these decisions to put tens of millions of dollars into ventures that are damned to fail from the beginning, that's not about business. It's about power, control of us. Now, if they actually wanted something that would work, well, they already know about us, but we're the enemy. We're the ones that they're trying to defeat. It would make far more sense to go for the low-hanging fruit of the new voices of black media, but they cannot afford to do that. They can't afford to get anywhere near our message. They created BNC to be counter-programming, to take on everything that we said, to oppose all of our stances. But we built our brands by fighting against the white media narrative. We are opposed to all of that intersectional, alternative lifestyle, coalition, patriarchal, class-based bullcrap that the clowns over at BNC were pushing. They weren't looking for a black audience. That was their downfall. They didn't want a black audience. What they were looking for was a white corporate, white advertiser-friendly viewership. And that network's coverage, the way that they framed issues and the way that they talked about the interest of the black street proved it. And that's no surprise. The guy who was the alleged CEO of that thing, Prince L. Hair, he used to be at CNN as head of the network's U.S. operations. They did everything that they could to distance themselves from the black consensus, to distance themselves from the black street. I told you about how during the Boston mayoral race, you had 3 or 4 black candidates, and most of them being black women, by the way, and they didn't even make it past the primaries. Boston is a city with at least a minimum 25% black population. Asians are a far smaller percentage of the demo, and yet the Democrats had no problem making sure that the black candidates got knocked out the box. And the folks over at BNC, instead of pointing out, wait a minute, how did all the black candidates get run out in the primaries, and this is supposed to be an election that black people should even take part in? Instead, BNC was saying what a great victory it was, because Boston was now going to have either an Asian or an Arab American woman as their next mayor. Oh, what a victory for women of color. Yeah, just not the color black, that's all. You know, I find it hard to believe that if this was Telemundo we were talking about, or if this was Al Jazeera, or if this was some Asian American Pacific Islander media network, and you had a city that was minimum 25% Asian, or 25% Arab at least, and you saw that 3 or 4 Arab candidates couldn't even make it past the primaries. They got washed out. For people who come from smaller demographics with smaller voter bases and smaller constituencies, I find it hard to believe that they would not be saying, wait a minute, how did that happen? And they would be asking why their candidates lost and saying what a shame it was that 3 qualified candidates were run out so early, which is what a black news channel is supposed to be doing when this happens to black people. You're not supposed to be cheering when black people lose a political race. And this is the same BNC who would occasionally talk about how more black women need to be in public office. Why, there are more black women running for public office. Yeah, and more black women losing too. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if they had more people who would speak up for them, don't you think? But instead of standing up for black people and pointing out how incongruous this was, instead, the so-called Black News Channel decided that that doesn't matter. What matters is the women of color sisterhood. Let's not lose sight of the big picture. They said the same crap that these bought and paid for Negro Democratic operatives say about coalitions and social constructs and patriarchy and intersectionalism and every other asinine talking point from the white left that we rejected a long time ago. They weren't saying anything that the black street was saying. What kind of black news is this? A media that doesn't say what we're saying and doesn't advocate for us is not our media. Now, of course, we all saw this one coming. We've been predicting for months and months now that the end was nigh for BNC. They gave a lot of their employees a pink slip for Christmas last year. I'm not joking. Just check out my December 19th video for the sad details on that one. So suffice it to say, these guys have been circling the toilet bowl for months. It was obvious long before the inevitable implosion that these guys were not long for this world. And what was the reaction of BNC's on-air talent when this was happening? Well, on March 25th at 12:35 p.m., about the time that the news was breaking that BNC was going belly up, you had Mark Lamont Shill on Twitter who was retweeting a BNC tweet saying that they had their all-time viewership record. What's that mean? They had 5 people watching instead of the usual 4 because of their coverage of Judge Ketanji Brown's confirmation hearings. That was at 12:35 p.m. And then, just a couple of hours later, Mark Lamont Shill went from saying, yes, a big success, huge, to having to admit to the ugly reality that his tweet didn't age very well. And what was his response? He said the real exclusive is that he, talking about Shahid Khan, is refusing to give people their paychecks today. Hundreds of employees, many of whom already took significant pay cuts, are now being denied money they've already worked for. Khan, a billionaire, simply says he doesn't want to pay it. Well, So much for believing in BNC's mission, huh? This guy doesn't even believe in paying them. But we can't be too surprised. After all, this was just a dummy front company in the first place, just a dummy front. And there's no honor among thieves, that's the name of that tune. Now, according to the LA Times, the people who ran that circus clearly knew that the vultures were circling. They had already tried to find some other network or white media outlet who would buy them, but there were no takers. Hell, they were so desperate they even went to Byron Allen, but he's already got enough low-rated channels of his own with viewership in the single digits. And besides, if Byron Allen can't sue it, then he doesn't want it. And when the hammer inevitably fell, BNC's chief executive Prince Onair wrote a memo about BNC's bankruptcy saying, "Due to challenging market conditions and global financial pressures, we have been unable to meet our financial goals." You know, when I read that, I couldn't help but think of Wesley Snipes in the first Blade movie and those iconic words that he said, you know the ones. "Some fools are always trying to ice skate uphill." That's what these guys were doing. Challenging market conditions. No, you were just simply trying to skate uphill. That's what happened. That was your downfall. It was due to the lack of black grassroots support. They rejected you and made sure that you couldn't use us to justify getting white advertising dollars, because that's the only way that you were going to keep this little operation going. That's the reason why BNC's out of business. Because as I and so many others have explained for years, that's the hustle that these so-called black outlets have been running for decades, from black legacy magazines like Jet, Ebony, and Black Enterprise to BET, and these other wannabe bootlick organizations like TV None that you see out there. That's the business model that they're all chasing. White advertiser dollars. They try to get a few of us to watch so that we will be their viewer base. And as soon as they think that they have enough of us on board, they'll immediately run to Ford or GM or Coca-Cola or whomever and say, "Wait, we've got these black people watching us, so you should give us some advertising. You should advertise with us. Here's our captive Negro audience." And these white companies will do it, so long as these black outlets don't criticize them and never report on anything that challenges white power. This is why you don't see these so-called black outlets going in on these white companies whenever black people sue them for discrimination or any of their other business practices. Once these white companies agree to advertise with these black media outlets, they understand that they're off limits for criticism. And as for the so-called CEO of BNC, Prince Onair, this guy hasn't bothered to post anything on Twitter since March 1st. So you knew he already knew the fix was in. He knew it was coming. Though totally in keeping with BNC's editorial policy of ignoring black people, Mr. Onair did find time to tweet something last October celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month and talking about how BNC delivers, quote, culturally specific content on issues that are central to the black and brown experience. Gee, I thought they were called Black News Channel, not Black and Brown News Channel. They didn't focus on the very audience that they claimed that they were going to be speaking to and speaking for, and that's why they're out of business. You're never going to see Telemundo or any other Hispanic network talking about content central to black anything. There's tons of black Latinos, but Hispanic media goes to great pains to avoid talking about them. If anyone ought to be making black and brown a regular part of their vocabulary, it's Hispanic media, but they don't. I've said for a long time that the purpose of any media is to promote a particular value system. What was the Black News Channel's value system? Well, we saw what it was. They advocated for intersectionalism. They advocated for women of color at the expense of black women. They reinforced the lie that black men are inherently sexual predators. Why on earth would any self-respecting black person tune in to hear the same anti-black crap that we can hear on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and all the rest of the white media? If you're going to call yourself starting a so-called black media anything in the current environment that the new voices of black media have created, you better understand what black people want. And what black people want are advocates in their media. They want champions who will unapologetically declare our interests, who will intelligently and aggressively push those interests. What we don't need are more of the same old leftover shills repeating the same old lies from the white media, Negroes who repeat the same BS talking points that the white liberals say. The only black media that will appeal to us is one that fights against the white media narrative, not one that reinforces it. Black news channels' purpose was to con us, to put some black faces in front of the camera and have them spouting the white media line. But we weren't fooled. And while I'm not glad at the prospect that you've got whatever remaining staff of BNC left that's going to find themselves suddenly unemployed, the truth of the matter is I feel the same way about them that I feel about any black person who does business with, say, Lee Daniels. Oh, there's a number of black folks who have horror stories to tell about the treatment they've received from Lee Daniels, janky business from that guy, but the truth of the matter is you didn't need to wait until Lee Daniels did you wrong to understand that this is not somebody you want to crawl into bed with, no pun intended. Lee Daniels has made it excruciatingly clear for many years he's only out to take care of himself. But none of how this turned out should surprise anyone. The company's filing for bankruptcy, and Shahid Khan, he's not even making payroll. The paychecks are going to be delayed. Yeah, real delayed. Some people are asking, what about severance? What about severance? Ain't gonna be no severance. Even Mark Lamont's shill pointed that out. As a matter of, man, I can't, he's saying that he doesn't want to pay it. Yeah, ain't gonna be no severance. Hell, ain't even gonna be a final paycheck. He's not even gonna pay them for the hours that they've worked. You see, family, this is the reason why you gotta check people's paperwork. See, before you deal with anybody, you gotta check their paperwork. See, if they had looked to see what kind of track record the Shahid Khan had when it came to black media, anything, what they would find is the closest that he gets to black people are the black employees that he's got, the black players for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's pretty much it. So these guys are very good for giving lip service, but when it comes to the tangibles, seems they're all talk. Oh yeah, the people who thought to themselves that this BNC was real and that all of you black media types who are poo-pooing at you guys just don't like the fact that they were able to get this taken care of, why, they're on their way now. White power has spent several years trying to cultivate a bumper crop of bootlicks to supplant and undermine and replace us, and it hasn't worked. Every time we look up, seems like there's some white media organization putting out some articles saying, here's the new black media people, here's the new black voices, here are the new black activists, new black leaders. Every time you look up, they're trying to find people who they picked and who they chose, cherry-picked Negroes who are supposed to be the ones who they point to and say, look, we're giving this person some exposure, we're giving them a lot of publicity, so you should be following them. Well, what makes these Negroes over here at some white university campus radio station supposed to be black people's voices? Well, because we said it. That's what makes them your voice, because we said it. We declared it, hence that makes it true. And when that failed, white powers tried to manufacture and invent their own phony black mouthpieces, and it just don't work. It's like I've always told you. These white corporations can give you a platform, but what they can't give you is legitimacy. Previously, it had been reported that BNC regularly pulls in, say, 4,000 people during their prime time programming. Hell, with numbers that low, they might as well hire Roly-Poly Martin. Speaking of which, remember how I said that I would just off myself if any of my videos pulled in sorry numbers like 9,000 views? Well, let me tell you something. If anything that I did in my entire life only got 4,000 views, I would drink a couple of gallons of nitroglycerin, sit on top of a barrel full of C4 explosives, and then light a match. When you're pulling in numbers that low, what that means is the problem isn't your advertising, as some slow wits have tried. They're just offering up the pathetic excuse. It was an advertising issue. No, it wasn't the advertising. Black people knew about BNC, and that was the problem. We knew what BNC was. We had already seen it. The problem was their programming, their editorial. That was the problem. See, you still got some weak-willed, weak-minded black folks running around, many of them who happen to be from similar circles as these clowns like Mark Lamont, Shill, and the others. And as far as they're concerned, why, if something's got the name black on the front of it, why, that could be an opportunity for me if this thing actually becomes successful. That's how they see it. They're on the same wavelength as the bootlicks, so that's the best that their mentality can do. But over here in the real world, we understand these guys never had a chance from the very beginning. No other media on the planet would actively insult and argue against the very people who they claim they want as their audience, but BNC did. No other outlet would go out of their way to ignore and even minimize the opinion and viewpoints of the people who they claim to want as their audience, like these chumps did. Now, even if you don't like what it is, that the black consensus is, what the broad opinion of the black street is. What you cannot do is claim, I'm going to be media for you, and at the same time I'm going to wag my finger at you and disagree with everything that you Negroes say. Mark Lamont Shill thought that he was doing big things when he posted that video where he argued with Judge Joe Brown that Bill Cosby was still a rapist and should never have been let out of prison. Why, he's a rapist. We got to be honest about it. He's a rapist. That's still the third most watched video on BNC's YouTube channel, by the way. Not anything that they did for themselves, but the fact that they were talking to somebody who didn't come from their ranks. I'm sure Lamont Shill was so proud of himself for that little video. I'm sure the other Negroes over there who desperately want a real job working for CNN or MSNBC or some other white media outlet, I'm sure that they were giving him an attaboy and telling him what a great job he did. I'll bet Lamont Shill was smugly telling himself that he managed to get some views with that video and why he and his pals, they're going to overtake the black media in short order. Why, we're on our way. We're getting traction. Look at this. Little did that mental midget realize that 1 million plus people who watched that video, they would never watch anything else that BNC ever did. That video and the others like it, where he's arguing with the black grassroots and against the black consensus, that did more than anything to put these guys out of business. That video and others like it did more to damage any pathetic hope BNC had to be viable than anything else. No, it wasn't the fact that people weren't watching that hurt them. It was the stuff that black people saw that killed that network. All the black people who watched that, who saw Shill arguing that Bill Cosby, a clearly innocent black man, ought to be in prison because black men do rape, that's someone who no black person's going to listen to. Shill's job, and the job of the rest of the bootlicks, whether they work for BNC or not, is to present the black community as being no more important or deserving of attention than anyone else at best, and super predators at worst. Our interests are no more important than anyone else's, and black people are as deserving of criticism as anyone else. Let me tell you something. Black people in general, black men in specific, lead the league in wrongful convictions. Every day almost, we're hearing or seeing another black man being released after years or usually decades in prison for crimes that they clearly didn't commit. And the evidence against them wasn't some damning video or some other irrefutable proof. The evidence was usually just a racist DA or state's attorney who made a mere accusation, then they impaneled an all-white jury with a white judge, and the defendant had a white public defender who didn't even try to defend them. The easiest thing in the world is to put a black man in prison, whether he did the crime or not. We get major time for offenses that everyone else gets probation for. And Mark Lamont Shill knows this. At least he says that whenever it's convenient for him to say it. So for Mark Lamont Shill to be spouting that line, the black rape culture line, that is damnable and that is treasonous. If you're going to be pushing the black rape culture line, then at the very least, shouldn't we be asking why it is that black men don't get the same treatment as, say, a Brock Turner? Oh, if you're going to be trying to put black men on the same level as all of these real super predators out here, then shouldn't we be asking if black men get the same treatment? But of course, that never comes up. Shill knew exactly what he was doing, auditioning to get his old job back being a regular guest on cable news. And like all bootlicks, he knows the surest way to get some white TV producer or white executive to notice you is to scream that black men are guilty as loudly as you can. That's how you get noticed. Well, Shill got noticed all right by black viewers, and that was the worst thing that could have possibly happened to him in BNC. We already had a low opinion of this clown before, and the few people who might have been lying to themselves about who and what he is, they lost all illusions after this. You can't go on the air constantly arguing against the black grassroots, trying to prop up a bunch of fakers, frauds, phonies, and fools, and then think that black people are going to like that. Is a brand new day. The black baby boomer crowd, the people who were terminally aspirational, where if you put black in front of it, why, they would just applaud it just because. No, we got a far, far more perceptive group now. We've seen the tricks, we recognize them, and we ain't going for it. BNC's problem was BNC, the people who ran it and the people they put in front of the cameras. These bootlicks are just the epitome of bias confirmation. They sit around in a circle and repeat their own asinine talking points to one another and assure themselves that they're the smartest Negroes on the planet. And because they went to an HBCU, they're smarter than the rest of us. And it falls to this talented 1%, as they see themselves, to shepherd the poor, ignorant black masses who are just too dumb to know what's in their own good to the promised land. But luckily, we have the shills like Joke Reed, Mark Lamont Shill, and Roly-Poly Martin who know what's in our best interest. They know it better than we do. They understand what the problems are. And the problem is, well, exactly the opposite of whatever black people say it is. Now, is this going to be the end of the white media's attempts to try to invent some counter-programming to the black media? Of course not. White supremacy has amassed enormous resources to go ahead and prop up more frauds like this. To them, $50 million is pocket change. This is a war that they're fighting against us. It's a war not merely for white primacy, but it's also a war for anti-black subjugation. That's the foundation of white supremacy. If black people are allowed to upset the racial pecking order, the racial pyramid, if you will, if that foundation cracks and is allowed to have an upheaval, well, the whole dang pyramid comes crashing down. So there's a lot of people who are extremely interested in making sure that that racial pyramid remains intact. And that means that that black foundation they've got under their feet must remain where they are. And if black people have decided to get uppity and they're not going to be listening to any of these white news anchors anymore, that's okay. They'll just find a few bootlicks and sellouts with the requisite amount of melanin, and they'll put them in front of the camera and try to present this person and say, he's saying the same thing. You'll listen to him now, right? They'll try that, and what they're seeing is it's not working. This was the goal that the black media set out 15 years ago. I told you that our mission was to take control of the social, political, and economic discourse within the black community and to elevate the debate. Take control of the discourse. That means that we are going to promote and disseminate a vocabulary of black empowerment. Start getting the lingo out there. Get those words out there. Make it where people start saying what we say regularly. That's taking control of the social discourse. All of the Kundalini nonsense and all of the rest of the hokery and fakery that had been in place before, that stuff's receded. We were getting the conversation on black economics. When we first came on the scene, people were poo-pooing the idea and turning up their noses at us and going, what are you talking about white supremacy stuff? What, y'all think y'all some sort of militants? Now everybody's talking it. See, that's another important aspect. If you're going to have a real black media, they got to be ahead of the curve. Black people need to know what's coming way before it gets here. We don't need to be the last ones to know. We need to know what's going on first. That's how you take advantage. That's how you get the lead and stay in the lead. Knowledge is power. Did you learn anything from BNC? Can any person truthfully say, BNC taught me something? Well, they teach you that black men are all sexual predators and that it doesn't matter if black women get all run out of the primaries in a major election. What matters is the sisterhood. I mean, you'll learn that. And you'll learn that we should be representing everyone else's interests and everyone else's issues because, well, reasons. It was obvious these guys were puppets on strings. And the black media cut those strings. We starved them for oxygen. We made it where they could never get that critical mass that they were so desperate to get. This is why I've been saying for a very long time and will continue to say, you, yes, you listening to me now, you black man and black woman, you are the prize that the Shahid Khans and the rest of the white media are trying to fight over. Because you are the black people who actually get off your butts and do things. You're the ones who actually believe in putting your money where your mouths are. You're going to be the ones who get things done. You are the threat to white supremacy. They got to find a way to distract you. So they bring in some old coonery and buffoonery. Hey, here's some love and hip hop. Here's some love and basketball. Here's some reruns of the Real Housewives of Who Gives a Damn. That's what they're trying to run at you. See if they can get you back on all of that hood ghetto nonsense. When they saw that you weren't going for it, they're like, it's kind of a problem here. Man, they really do like this black media stuff. You say, man, really? Well, I know. What we'll do is we'll have our guys get out here and say, this is going to be media for black people. And this is going to be media for you. It's the same hokey crap that they've been doing since forever. I remember that Ronald Reagan himself, old racist that he was, he actually narrated a film reel about the Tuskegee Airmen way back in the 40s or 50s, whichever it was. And it was called Wings for This Man. It was a film reel about the Tuskegee Airmen, and the narration that Reagan was giving, as the name of this particular film would imply, it was all about pandering and patronizing, and yet here are wings for this man. And they've been doing that ever since. Every time black people start to step forward, assert our rights, and shake up the status quo, here comes some pandering, sniveling nonsense that pretends to be speaking to us when it's obvious that they're speaking at us. This is not new at all. It's quite old. So, dearly beloved, we gather here to pay our final disrespects to the Black News Channel. Oh, forget about that. We're here to dance on their graves. Hell, we didn't even wait for them to be put in the grave yet. We're already dancing on their corpse right there in the hospital. That's right, Shahid Khan was forced to take them off of life support. We were the ones who kicked the plug out of the wall. We yanked the tube out of their doggone throats, and now we're sitting here dancing a jig on their corpse right there on the hospital bed in the hospital. You got the nurses and orderlies in Mark Lamont Shill crying up a storm, get off of them, get off of them. And we're sitting here going, not a chance. But this is how we got to be. We got to make it very clear. We're not going to be allowing them to just unopposed start propping up these organizations. Because here's the thing. Let's be bluntly honest here. We got to be realistic. They're playing the game of law of averages. They got these almost unlimited resources to work with. And we are presenting them with a persistent threat. Their money's not going away anytime real soon, and the threat that we pose isn't going away anytime real soon. So they're going to have to keep doing this. And what they're betting on is that sooner or later, law of averages will kick in, and one of their little bootlick operations has got to take hold. One of them's got to eventually, right? Let's not kid ourselves here. White supremacy believes in playing the long game. They believe in it. But you know what? Nobody plays a longer game than the black grassroots. We've been out here resisting these white supremacists for 500 years, long after everybody else threw in the towel after the first few years. We've been out here for 5 centuries fighting them, and we're still fighting them today. Make no mistake, there are going to be other battles. You can count on that. But the failure of BNC simply proves that the single most important factor in the failure of these phony baloney, propped up imitation black media counter-programming organizations is whether or not you give them any attention. It really is as simple as that. You see, it wasn't me and the other new voices of black media who strangled BNC out of existence. It was you. Never underestimate the power of your involvement, or lack thereof. You deprived them of the oxygen that they needed. You refused to watch them, and you also told other people, don't fool with these guys. This BNC thing, no, man, you can skip that. You ain't got to pay that, no, never mind. Everybody put the word out and made it very clear. We see you guys for what you are. We refuse to let them get any traction. We refuse to let anyone forget Mark Lamont Shill's disrespect of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. We refuse to let these guys play this game of, we're going to trot out the same lines that CNN says, and you guys will go along with it because there's a blackface doing it, and we got to show some black solidarity. Here you are cheerleading for an innocent black man to be put in prison, repeating the white media's black male rape culture line, and you got the nerve to tell me I should watch you based on black solidarity? If you don't get the hell out of here. The lesson to be taken away from all of this is one that we already know, and one that the white media's slowly, surely, and painfully becoming acquainted with. They don't have enough billionaires to be able to prop up some counterfeit black media. We're here, and we're not going to be supplanted. We're not going the way of BNC. And that's because we stand with the black street. That's the reason you stand with us. That's the reason why black people were not at all anxious about trying to listen to BNC. Once black folks actually had a taste of what a real media advocacy organization sounds like, black folks who are actually speaking in their interest and saying what they say and speaking to the truth of it as opposed to dismissing every word of it, they're not about to go to the same black cable bootlicks who were just this time last month propping up all the white media's talking points and telling black folks how they don't have a point. And every time somebody objects to what black people say, they just sit there and meekly let it go by. So take a bow, family. You're the ones who made this happen. From roly-poly begging for a government contract to Mark Lamont's shill and his other out-of-work pals begging for a corporate job, we're seeing that being a bootlick is a career path that doesn't come with a retirement plan, or a severance check for that matter. Good night, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Mandisa, CJ Link, Amber, Rufus Reed, and Jacques Hargett. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.